On Mother's Day, my son set a box of chocolates on my kitchen table, kissed the top of my head the way he used to when he was 9, and asked me a question that took 11 months of my life and laid it bare in one sentence. Mom, do you like the $5,000 Clara gives you every month? Is it enough? I had a teacup halfway to my mouth. I put it down so I wouldn't drop it. $5,000 every month. For almost a year, I had been splitting one chicken breast into 3 dinners. I had been telling the pharmacist I'd come back for the rest of my prescription next week and the week after that. I had sat in the cold because the gas bill scared me more than the chill did, and my son thought I was getting $5,000 a month. I looked at him, at his good coat and his tired, handsome face, and I did the only thing my body would let me do. I smiled. I said, "It's plenty, sweetheart. Don't you worry about me." Behind him in the doorway, his wife was watching. Clara. She had on a camel coat that cost more than my refrigerator and a smile that never once reached her eyes. When I said it's plenty, something in her shoulders let go. Relief. She thought she'd gotten away with it for one more visit. She had no idea that the woman in the apron she kept calling forgetful had spent 30 years charting the truth for a living and had already started charting hers. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who smiled at you while they did it, stay with me. This one's for you. And before we go further, tell me in the comments which town you're watching from. I like knowing who's in the room. My name is Ruth Calloway. I'm 66 years old, and I live alone in a narrow blue house on Linden Street, on the edge of Belmont, North Carolina, where the road runs out into pine trees, and the freight trains still rattle the windows at 2 in the morning. My husband Walter built half of what's in this house with his own hands. He taught shop at the high school for 31 years, and he could make a kitchen drawer slide shut so smooth you'd think it floated. He passed 6 years ago. Cancer took him slow, over 14 months, and I nursed him through every day of it, because that is what I did for a living too. I was a hospice nurse. I sat with people in the last rooms they would ever sleep in, and I learned that the truth has a particular weight to it, and that people who are lying have a particular lightness. I learned to hear the difference. We had one son, Nathan. He came late when I'd nearly stopped hoping, and he came perfect. I can still feel the warmth of him asleep on my chest in that rocking chair by the window. I raised that boy to shake a man's hand and look him in the eye, to measure twice before he cut once, the way his daddy taught him. Walter used to say, "Measure twice, Ruthie." The truth holds still long enough to be measured if you're patient with it. I have leaned on that sentence more in the last year than in the 40 before it. Nathan did well, better than well. He started a development company out of a rented office above a tire shop, and now Callaway Ridge has its name on 3 shopping centers and a medical park, and Nathan drives a black Range Rover and lives behind a gate in Charlotte. I am proud of him. I want that understood before I tell you the rest. I am proud of the man I thought he'd become. He married Clara 4 years ago. She came into our lives polished and laughing, with that camel coat and a way of touching your forearm when she talked to you, like the two of you shared a secret. I tried to love her. I made her my mother's pound cake the first Thanksgiving, and she took 2 bites and said, "Oh, Ruth, I have to be so careful with sugar," and slid the plate an inch away. Small thing. I remembered it anyway. I remember most things. That's the part she got wrong about me. Here is what my life actually looked like. The 11 months my son believed I was living comfortable. I had stopped buying coffee that wasn't on sale. I clipped the circulars from the paper Earl Whitlock next door left on my porch when he was done with it. I learned which day the food pantry at the Methodist church set out the day-old bread, and I learned to get there early, because by 9 it was gone. I am not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you so you understand the size of the lie. A son was sending $5,000 into the dark every month, and his mother was rinsing out a tea bag to get a second cup. The first time the floor really dropped out from under me was at the Walgreens on Wilkinson Boulevard in March. I take a blood pressure pill and a heart pill, and the heart one had gone up to $91 for the month. I stood at that counter with my debit card, and I knew, the way you know a step isn't there in the dark, that there wasn't $91 behind it. The pharmacist was a kind young man named Tomas. He saw my face. He said, "Mrs. Calloway, why don't I fill the heart one and we'll hold the other for next week?" He did it so gently that I cried in the car, not because of the money, because of the gentleness, because a stranger in a white coat had more care for me that afternoon than the woman who married my son. That was the day I drove to the bank. There was one more thing from those months I'll tell you, because it's the part that still sits closest to the bone. Earl Whitlock next door is 80 and a widower himself, and one cold morning in January he caught me at my mailbox and looked at me a beat too long and said, "Ruth, your porch light's been off a while." It wasn't really about the porch light. He'd noticed the heat was off too, the way you notice a thing about someone you've lived beside for 20 years. He didn't make me say it. He just started leaving things. A sack of oranges, a pot of soup with a note that said, "Made too much again," which was a lie, a kind one, the only kind of lie I had any use for that winter. I let him think I didn't know what he was doing. He let me keep my pride. That's what decent people do for each other, and it is exactly the opposite of what was being done to me by the woman wearing my son's ring. I never forgot the difference. I was being starved by family and fed by a neighbor, and I wrote that down too, not as evidence, just so I'd never let myself forget who was who. First Belmont Savings is a low brick building with a flag out front, and I'd had an account there since 1987. I sat down across the desk from the manager, a heavy-set man named Mr. Pruitt who'd known Walter, and I asked him to do something I'd never had to ask anyone in my life. I asked him to tell me if my son had been sending me money. Mr. Pruitt typed. He frowned at the screen, the way a man frowns when the screen is about to make him uncomfortable. He turned it a little toward me. "Ruth," he said, "the only thing that's come in this year is your Social Security and $1.14 of interest. There's no transfer from anyone named Nathan Calloway. There's no transfer from anyone at all." "He says he's been sending $5,000 a month," I told him. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "Since last summer." Mr. Pruitt was quiet a moment. He had the decency not to rush. "Then it's going somewhere," he said, "but it isn't coming here." I drove home the long way, past the old high school where Walter taught, and I sat in the gravel lot for a while with the engine off. 11 months, 5,000 each. I did the arithmetic the way I used to total a patient's chart, slow and sure. $55,000. $55,000 had walked out of my son's account with my name on the envelope, and not 1 cent of it had ever touched my hand. I want to tell you I was furious. I wasn't. Not yet. What I felt, sitting in that lot, was a terrible, clean focus, the kind that used to come over me at 3 in the morning when a patient's breathing changed and I knew the night was about to ask something of me. Walter's voice was in my ear. "Measure twice, Ruthie." So I went home and I got out a green spiral notebook, the cheap kind, and on the first page I wrote the date and 1 line. The money is real. The deliveries are not. That notebook became the most important thing I owned. I did not call Nathan and scream. I want you to understand the discipline that took, because every cell in me wanted to. But I have buried enough people to know that the truth, handled wrong, dies in your hands. If I called my son in tears and said your wife is a thief, what would happen? He would call Clara. Clara would cry. Clara would say his mother was getting confused, losing the thread. You know how she's been since Daddy passed. And Nathan, who loved me and trusted her, and was exhausted from carrying a company on his back, would want to believe the version that let him keep his marriage. I would lose him. I would lose the money and the truth and my son in 1 phone call. So I started charting. Every time Clara came by, I wrote it down. The date, the time, what she wore, what she said, whether she brought anything, whether she touched the subject of money or stepped around it. She came about twice a month, always sweeping in like she was doing me a favor by existing in my living room. She'd bring a candle, a jar of fancy jam, a little potted thing that died because she never asked if I had a sunny window, never an envelope, never a check, not once. I'll read you a few of those entries the way I wrote them. April 6th. Clara, 2 p.m., white slacks, sunglasses on indoors. Brought a candle, smells like grapefruit. Stayed 20 minutes. Asked if I'd been remembering to take my pills. Did not mention money. Left when I asked her to sit for tea. April 22nd, Clara, late, 4:40. New handbag, the quilted kind. Said Nathan was swamped and sends his love. I said the gutter's leaking and she said she'd tell him. She didn't. Stood the whole time like the chair might bite her. May 1st. No Clara. She texted that she dropped by, but I must have been out. I was home all day. I was on the porch shelling peas from 11 to 2. No car came down Linden. None. That last one mattered more than I knew when I wrote it. because the first of the month was, I would learn, the day she swore up and down she handed me cash in person. One afternoon in May, she came in smelling like a perfume counter, and I decided to test the water. I poured us both sweet tea, and I sat her down before she could get away, and I said, easy as anything, Clara, honey, I want to thank you for the help you and Nathan give me. It means more than you know. She didn't blink. She reached over and patted my hand and said, Ruth, you don't ever have to thank me. Family takes care of family. And she smiled that smile, and I smiled mine, and underneath the table, my pen was already writing the entry in my head. She takes the thank you like she earned it. She believes I believe her. Good. A week after that, she came in something new. I heard it before I saw it, a low, expensive purr coming down Linden where usually it's just Earl's old pickup and the mail. I went to the window, and there it was in my gravel, a white SUV with the dealer's paper plate still in the back glass and the temporary tag taped up. Clara got out of it the way you get out of a thing you want a person to notice, slow, with a little smile, smoothing her dress. You like it? She said, before she'd even reached the porch. I needed something safer for the highway. Nathan worries. It's a beautiful car, I said, and I meant it, because it was, and because I already knew, deep down where the cold lived, whose money was sitting in that down payment. Must have been dear. Oh, you know how leases are, she said, waving her hand, already past it, already onto the candle she'd brought. Vanilla this time. She set it on my table next to the heart pills I'd lined up in their little plastic box, and she did not look at the pills, and I thought, you've never once looked at the pills. When she left, I stood on the porch and watched that white SUV pull away clean and quiet, and I went inside and wrote it down. New car. White SUV. Dealer tag. Says it's a lease. Down payment came from somewhere. Not from a boutique salary. Find out where. I found out where in April, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's a question for you. While we're sitting in it together, if you found out someone close to your family had been doing this to your mother, would you blow it open right that second? Or would you wait and watch and let them dig their own hole a little deeper? Tell me below. I genuinely want to know because what I chose to do next, not everybody would have the stomach for. What I needed was proof that lived somewhere besides my notebook. My notebook proved I was paying attention. It didn't prove where $55,000 went. For that, I needed the inside of Nathan's company, and I had no way in. Until I did, through the side door, the way these things usually happen. Callaway Ridge throws a cookout every June for the staff and their families, out at a park by the lake, and I'd gone the year before. Nathan had asked me to come this year too, in a rushed phone call, and I almost said no because I didn't have it in me to stand there and play the proud, comfortable mother. But I went, because I had started to think of Nathan's company the way I used to think of a patient's room. Everything I needed was in there. I just had to be in the room. I found her by the lemonade, a woman about 50, in a sundress with reading glasses pushed up in her hair, sitting a little apart from the younger crowd. Denise Okafor. She ran accounts payable, which is a fancy way of saying she was the one who actually sent the money out the door. I sat down next to her because she had a kind, tired face, the kind I trusted from a lifetime of reading faces, and we got to talking. Her mother had passed the year before. She'd nursed her at the end. We had that instantly, the way two people who've sat in those rooms always do. I didn't ambush her. I want to be clear about that. I'm not in the habit of using a grieving woman. But over a paper plate of barbecue, with the lake going gold behind us, I told her a softer version of the truth. I told her I was worried I'd made a mess of my own finances, that some money my son sent didn't seem to be reaching me, and that I didn't want to upset him over what might be my own mistake. Could she, as a kindness, help an old woman understand how the company even sent money to family, so I'd know what to look for? Denise got very still. She looked at me for a long moment over those reading glasses, and she said, slow and careful, Mrs. Callaway, how much is your son sending you? And where's it supposed to go? $5,000 a month, I said. Into my account at First Belmont Savings, 11 months now. She set her fork down. There's a standing transfer, she said quietly. $5,000 first business day of the month from Nathan's personal account. I see it cross every month because it touches a ledger I reconcile. The payee is R. Callaway. That's me, I said. R. Callaway, Ruth. It is not your account number, Denise said. I'd have to check, but the routing on that payee isn't First Belmont. I'd remember a Belmont routing number. Half my church bank's there. She was looking at me now with a thing in her eyes I can only call dread, because she had started to see the shape of it before I had to say it. Mrs. Calloway, who set up the payee? I don't know, I said. I never set up anything. I didn't know it existed until 3 weeks ago. Denise Okafor took off her reading glasses and folded them and held them in her lap, and she said the sentence that turned my notebook into a case. Then somebody opened an account in your name that isn't yours, she said, and they've been catching your son's money in it for almost a year, and I think you and I both know there's only one person close enough to do that. We didn't say the name. We didn't have to. Across the park, by the grill, Clara was laughing with a glass of wine in her hand, in white again, the sun all over her like she was the one thing it had come out for. Denise did not promise me anything that day. She was a careful woman, and she loved her job, and she had a son in college. But she gave me her cell number on a torn corner of a paper plate, and she said, "Let me look, quietly. I'm not going to be part of hurting your son, but I'm not going to be part of robbing his mother either." 3 days later, she called me after dark. I could hear she'd waited until her house was quiet. "I pulled the payee record," she said. "The account catching the transfer is at a bank in Gastonia. It was opened 15 months ago in the name Ruth Calloway, with a Charlotte address. Your son's house. The signature card has your name on it." A pause. "It is not your signature, Mrs. Calloway. I've seen yours on your son's emergency contact forms. This one's careful, but it's not yours. The loops are wrong." I sat down on the floor of my own hallway with the phone against my ear. Forged. Somebody had practiced my name until they got it close enough and walked into a bank 15 months ago and signed it. "There's more," Denise said, and her voice dropped lower. "The company card. There's a second card on the corporate account, an authorized user, household and entertainment for client dinners. The name on it is Clara Calloway. I went back through it tonight. A weekend in Charleston in February, 2 nights, $1,400. A spa in Asheville. A dress shop on Selwyn that rang up 1,900 in one afternoon. The down payment on a car in April. A lease, $6,000 down through the card. Mrs. Calloway, since last summer she's run almost $30,000 through that card on top of the transfers. I'm going to be honest about what I felt because the whole genre lies about this, and I won't. I did not feel powerful. I felt sick. I felt the specific grief of a mother who has just learned the exact dollar amount of how little her son's wife thinks of her. 30,000 in dinners and dresses, 55,000 siphoned into a forged account. And meanwhile, I was holding a heart pill at a counter, wondering if I could afford to keep my heart beating one more week. "Denise," I said, "will you help me prove it the right way?" She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "My mother was robbed by my brother," she finally said, "before she died. We never made it right because we were too scared of what it would do to the family. I have regretted that every single day." She took a breath. "Yes, the right way. But we do it so it holds. We do it so she can't cry her way out of it in front of your boy." "That," I said, "is exactly how I want to do it." I want to tell you about the hardest night in all of this, because it wasn't the dinner and it wasn't the bank. It was a Thursday in the middle when none of it was finished yet. Nathan called me. "Just to talk," he said, which he almost never did anymore, and the sound of his voice nearly undid the whole thing right there. He sounded so tired. He said work was crushing him, that Clara had been on him about a trip she wanted to take, that he felt like he was running uphill carrying everybody. And then he said, "But you're okay, right, Mom? You're comfortable? That's the one thing I don't have to worry about." There it was, my son handing me the chance to tell him the truth, on a Thursday, over the phone, the easy way. And I couldn't take it. Because if I told him then, exhausted and alone in a hotel of his own making, with nothing in front of him but my word against hers, I would lose. I knew it the way I knew his breathing on the other end of that line. He'd want to believe the version that let him keep his life standing. He'd call her, she'd cry, and the next time she came to my house, the candles and the cash would suddenly appear, the gaps would get papered over, and I would have spent my one shot and gotten back nothing but a daughter-in-law who now knew to watch me. So I lied to my own boy. I sat in my kitchen with the green notebook closed on the table in front of me, the whole case sitting inside it, and I made my voice warm and easy, and I said, "I'm just fine, sweetheart. You take care of yourself. Don't you spend 1 minute worrying about your mama." He believed me because I'm good at it. Because 30 years of telling frightened families it's going to be peaceful taught me how to make my voice a soft place to land. He said, "Love you, Mom," and he hung up, and I sat there in the dark, and I cried like I hadn't since Walter. I'm telling you this part because the stories like mine usually skip it. They make the patient mother into stone. I wasn't stone. Every day I waited, I was choosing the truth over my son's comfort, and that choice has a price. And I paid it in full on a Thursday with a closed notebook on my table. If you've ever had to hold a hard thing inside so you could hold it right, you know exactly the weight I mean. Tell me below. I think more of us have carried that than will ever say so out loud. I dried my face, I opened the notebook back up, and I kept going, because the only thing worse than the waiting would have been wasting it. I needed one more person, and I found her through Gloria Tate, who runs the senior center over on Catawba Street, where I'd started going for the cheap lunch on Tuesdays and stayed for the company. Gloria is the kind of woman who knows everybody and forgets nothing, and when I told her a careful piece of it, she didn't gasp and she didn't pity me. She said, "Ruth, you need Carmen Reyes," and she wrote a number on the back of a bingo card. Carmen Reyes worked for a legal aid outfit called the Piedmont Elder Justice Project, in a cramped office with a window AC unit that dripped into a coffee can. She was maybe 40, sharp as a tack, and she'd seen every version of my story 100 times, which I found strangely comforting. It meant I wasn't crazy. It meant I wasn't even rare. I laid it all out on her desk, the green notebook. Mr. Pruitt's printout showing nothing ever came in. What Denise had found, which I was careful to describe as coming from someone inside the company who'll talk when it's time, because I would not put Denise's name in danger until I had to. Carmen read it all without a word. Then she looked up and said, "Mrs. Calloway, do you understand what this is?" "My daughter-in-law stole from me," I said. "It's worse than theft, legally," she said. "She opened a bank account in your name with a forged signature. That's identity fraud and forgery on top of financial exploitation of an elder, which this state takes very seriously. The card spending is a matter between her and your son's company. But the account with your name on it, that's yours to press. You're the victim of record." She leaned back. "The question is what you want. Some people want the money, some people want her gone. Some people want their kid to see it with his own eyes before they go to the police. They're not always the same path." I thought about Nathan asleep on my chest in that rocking chair. I thought about him at the cookout, looking 10 years older than he was, run ragged by a woman who was bleeding him while she smiled. "I want my son to watch the truth come out of her own mouth," I said. "And then I want the law to do the rest, so there's no taking it back. I don't want a fight in my kitchen that she can talk her way out of by Tuesday. I want it on paper, in a room she can't charm." Carmen Reyes smiled for the first time, a small, dangerous smile, the smile of a woman who liked her work. "Then let's give your son a reason to be in the room," she said. "Here's the thing about a trap. It works best when the person walks in thinking they're the one in control." I called Nathan that Sunday, and I made my voice warm and a little wobbly, an old woman's voice, the voice Clara had taught him to expect. I told him I'd been thinking about his father lately and feeling lonesome, and I wanted to have them both over for a real supper, just the three of us, like a family, pot roast, the way he liked it, the good plates. Would they come the Sunday after next? He said yes before I finished asking. I heard something in his voice, relief maybe, that his mother wanted him close. It cut me, that relief. I had not made him feel wanted in months because I'd been too busy drowning quietly so he wouldn't worry. "And Mom," he said, "I'm glad the money's helping. I know 5,000 isn't a fortune, but I wanted you comfortable." "It's a blessing," I said. "Clara's so good to bring it by." There was the smallest pause on the line. "Yeah," he said. "She's good about that." I wrote that pause down too. I spent the next 2 weeks getting ready, and not just with a roast. Carmen and I built the supper like a surgery. Denise pulled clean copies of everything, the payee record, the forged signature card from Gastonia, the card statements with the Charleston weekend, and the Asheville spa, and the car down payment circled. Carmen had a colleague verify the account at Gastonia was, in fact, not connected to me in any legitimate way, and she got a one-page summary from the bank that said so in plain English. We put it all in a plain manila folder, and I set that folder in the sideboard drawer in my dining room, 6 feet from where Clara would sit. The day of the supper, I cooked from noon on. Pot roast, carrots, Walter's mother's biscuits, a peach cobbler. I ironed the tablecloth that came over with my grandmother. I polished the good forks. I wanted the room soft and warm and ordinary, because a soft, warm, ordinary room is the last place a liar braces herself. I wanted Clara relaxed. I wanted her loose and a little bored, reaching for the second glass of wine, sure as ever that the old woman across the table was no threat to anything. Denise and Carmen parked around the corner on Linden in Denise's car and waited for my text. At 6, the Range Rover came down the gravel. Clara got out first, in a green silk dress and heels that were ridiculous on my driveway, holding a grocery store bouquet. Nathan came around with a bottle of wine, and when he hugged me on the porch, I held on a second longer than I should have, because part of me was about to grieve, and I knew it. "Something smells incredible," Nathan said. "It's your grandmother's biscuits," I told him. "Sit down, both of you. Let me feed my family." I let the first half hour be lovely. I want you to know that. I didn't poison the meal with it. We ate, and Nathan told a story about a job site, and I laughed in the right places, and Clara relaxed exactly the way I needed her to. 1 glass in, then most of a second, her shoulders coming down, her smile going lazy. She even complimented the roast, which surprised me, until I realized she'd already decided the evening was hers. I waited until the cobbler. I served it warm, and I poured Nathan a little more wine, and then I folded my hands on my grandmother's tablecloth, and I said, "Gentle as Sunday. Clara, honey, I've been meaning to ask you something, and I hope it's all right." "Of course, Ruth," she said. "The money you bring me every month," I said. "The 5,000. I just want to make sure I'm keeping it all straight in my head, because Nathan worries about me being forgetful." I smiled at my son. "What day is it you bring it by? I want to be sure I'm home so you're not making the drive for nothing." She didn't even slow down. That's how sure she was. "The first Sunday of the month, Ruth," she said. "I always come the first Sunday. I bring it in an envelope. I sit right here with you." She gestured at the table like she could see herself doing it. "We have our little visit." "Cash?" I said. "Cash," she said. "I know you don't like the bank stuff. Cleaner this way." I nodded slowly like I was working it through. "That's funny," I said, "because I keep a little book of who comes and goes just so I don't lose track. And my book says the last few first Sundays, you weren't here at all. May 1st, I was on my porch shelling peas from 11 to 2, and no car came down Linden. April, I had Earl next door drive me to church, and I never saw you. I've got it all written down, sweetheart. 11 months of first Sundays." I let that sit. "And not one envelope in any of them?" For the first time her smile moved, just a flicker at the corner. "Well," she said with a small laugh, "you said it yourself, Ruth. You forget things. I've been here. Maybe you wrote it down wrong." And that's when Nathan, my Nathan, who had been quiet and a little confused this whole time, said the thing I'd been waiting 2 weeks for. He said it slow, not even suspicious yet, just puzzled. "Wait, you bring it in cash? On the first Sunday?" He frowned at his wife. "Clara, the transfer's automatic. It comes out of my account on the first business day of the month and goes straight to Mom's bank. It's been set up that way the whole time. There's no cash. There's no envelope. The money goes bank to bank." The room went so quiet I could hear the freight train, far off, starting its low complaint. Clara looked at her husband, then at me, then back at him, and I watched her reach for the only road she had left. "Honey," she said light and quick, "you're confused, both of you. The bank thing must not have worked, so I started bringing it in person. I didn't want to bother you with it. You've got so much on your plate. I've been driving it out here myself out of my own care for your mother, and now I'm getting accused of God knows what at a dinner table." Her voice climbed into the wounded register, the one that had worked on him 100 times. Her eyes went shiny right on cue. "This is so hurtful, Nathan. I do everything for this family." It was a good performance. A year ago, it would have worked. I watched my son's face start to soften toward her, watched the husband in him want to comfort his crying wife, and I understood that this was the moment the whole thing turned on. So I stood up and I walked to the sideboard, and I took out the manila folder, and I laid it open on the tablecloth between them. "Then explain this," I said. I didn't shout. I never raised my voice once that whole night. I just laid it out, page by page, the way I used to walk a family through a chart so they'd understand what was happening to someone they loved. "This," I said, sliding the first sheet to Nathan, "is from my bank, First Belmont Savings, where I've banked since you were a baby. It shows every dollar that came into my account this year, my Social Security, $1.14 of interest. That's all. No 5,000, no 55,000, nothing from you, ever, not 1 month." Nathan picked it up. His hand wasn't steady. "This," I said, sliding the next, "is the account your money's actually been going to. It's at a bank in Gastonia. It was opened 15 months ago in the name Ruth Calloway, with your home address, Nathan, not mine." I let him read the address, his own address, in his mother's name. "I never opened that account. I've never set foot in that bank. I didn't know it existed until 2 months ago." Clara had gone very still. The shine in her eyes had dried right up. "And this," I said, and I laid down the signature card, "is the card they signed to open it. That's my name. Look close, son. You've seen my hand your whole life. Look at the R." Nathan looked. I watched it land. I watched my son understand that someone had practiced his mother's signature. "That's not your writing," he said quietly. "No," I said, "it isn't." I didn't even have to do the card statements, but I did them anyway, because I wanted it complete, and because I wanted Clara to sit there while every receipt came out. The Charleston weekend, the spa, the dress shop on Selwyn, the 6,000 down on the lease. I laid them in a row like I was dealing cards, and the whole time the only sound was paper on linen and Nathan's breathing going ragged. He looked up at his wife. When he spoke, his voice came out of somewhere I'd never heard from him. "Where did the money go, Clara?" "Nathan." "My mother was getting bread from a church." His voice cracked clean down the middle on the word bread. "She was rationing her heart medicine while you spent $2,000 on a dress, with a card, with my card, in her name. I was going to pay it back," Clara whispered. It was the first true thing she'd said all night, and it damned her completely, because you don't pay back what you were given. You only pay back what you took. "You forged her name," Nathan said. He was on his feet now, and the chair had gone over behind him, and I let it lie there. "You forged my mother's name at a bank. Do you understand what that is? Do you understand what you did?" And then Clara did the thing I will never forget, the thing that told me she'd never once seen me as a person, only as a soft old obstacle. She turned to me. She put on the wounded shine again. Fresh tears summoned out of nowhere, and she reached her hand across my grandmother's tablecloth toward mine. "Ruth," she said, trembling, "you understand, don't you? You know I'd never hurt this family. You're a mother. You forgive. Tell Nathan it's all a misunderstanding. Please, you're the only one who can fix this." I looked at that manicured hand reaching for mine. I looked at the rings on it, paid for with my heart medicine and my son's trust. I did not take it. "Clara," I said, and I made my voice as kind as I have ever made it, because the kindness was the cruelest part, and I knew it. I spent 30 years sitting with people in the last hour of their lives. People don't lie at the end. They've got no reason to. So I know exactly what the truth sounds like, and I have known since March that you don't speak it. I folded my hands so she'd understand hers had nowhere to land. "I'm not going to fix this for you. I'm the one who broke it open." That was when the knock came at the door. I'd texted Denise from my lap 2 minutes before. Carmen Reyes came in first, in her good jacket, with her card already out, and behind her came Denise Okafor, and Clara's face when she saw the woman from Accounts Payable was the face of someone watching the floor of a building give way under her feet. "Mrs. Calloway," Carmen said to me, calm and clear, "is this the woman you've named?" "It is," I said. "Then I'd advise everyone to stop talking," Carmen said, "because everything past this point goes on the record. I'll tell you the rest plainly, because the law part isn't where the heart of this lives, and I don't want to pretend it was tidy or fast. It wasn't. The Gastonia account was frozen within the week, what little Clara hadn't already pulled out of it. Carmen filed the report on the forgery and the elder financial exploitation, and because the bank account had been opened with a forged signature, it stopped being a family argument and became a matter for the district attorney, exactly the way Carmen had promised me it would, the kind of trouble you can't cry your way out of at a kitchen table. Nathan didn't speak to Clara that night after they left my house, or much after. He moved into a hotel by the airport the next morning. The company's lawyers got involved over the card, because $30,000 of corporate spending doesn't disappear without a paper trail and a reckoning, and Denise, brave woman, told the truth in a conference room to people far above her, and kept her job and slept better, she told me, than she had since her mother died. Clara took a plea, in the end. Carmen said the forged signature card was the thing she couldn't get around, because a signature is a signature, and an expert can tell, and hers was practiced, but it wasn't mine. She got probation and a felony on her record, and an order to pay back every dollar, the $55,000, and the card spending both, which she will be paying on for years out of whatever she earns. Nathan filed for divorce before the leaves turned. There was no scene, no reconciliation, no tearful second chance. She tried once, a long letter full of the word understand, and Nathan read 2 lines of it and put it in the trash. And that was the last time her name was spoken with any softness in our family. The bridge stayed down. I built no road back to her, and I never will. Some people show you exactly who they are, and the kindest thing you can do for yourself is believe them the first time. I got my money back, or I will, in pieces, over years. But I want to tell you what I actually did with the first chunk of it, the part that came through fast from the frozen account, because it's the only part of this whole story that I'm proud of without any ache underneath. I fixed the roof, I paid Tomas's pharmacy off, and I filled every prescription on the same day for the first time in a year, and stood in that parking lot and breathed. And then I drove over to Gloria Tate at the senior center, and I gave them enough to buy a used van, a real one, with a lift on the back, because half the folks at that Tuesday lunch can't drive anymore and miss their doctor's appointments because nobody can take them. There's a magnet on the side of that van now with the center's name on it. There is no plaque with my name. I didn't want one. I just wanted Mrs. Odell, who's 83 and can't see well enough to drive, to make it to her eye doctor, which is its own kind of joke we both laughed about. I'm not a foundation. I'm not a cause. I'm one old woman who got robbed and got it back and bought a van. That's the whole size of it, and it's enough. Nathan and I are slow about each other now, and I think that's right. He carries a guilt I can't lift off him, the guilt of a son who believed his wife over the silence of his mother, who thought $5,000 a month was the same thing as showing up. He came by a few Sundays after it all broke, and he sat at this same table where the folder came out, and he put his face in his hands and he said, "Mom, I should have known. You went quiet, and I didn't even ask why. I just assumed you were taken care of." I let him sit in it a minute, because some things you have to feel all the way before you can set them down. Then I put my hand on the back of his neck the way I did when he was small, and I said, "Your daddy used to tell you to measure twice. You forgot to measure once, but you measured in the end, and you measured right, and you did it knowing it would cost you your marriage. That's not nothing, son. That's most of what being a good man is." He comes for supper most Sundays now. He fixed the gutter himself, on a ladder, in the rain, badly, and I haven't told him it leaks worse than before, because watching him do it meant more to me than a dry gutter ever could. We don't talk about her. There's nothing left there to talk about. The bridge is down, and we've both stopped looking at the river. Sometimes in the evening, I sit on the porch where I shelled those peas, the peas that turned out to be the most important entry in my whole green notebook, and I smell the cedar box Walter built that I keep my letters in, and I think about how close I came to staying quiet. How easy it would have been to tell myself I was confused, that I was old, that $55,000 couldn't really be vanishing under my own name without my knowing. That's what she was counting on. That's what they always count on, the Claras of the world. They count on you being too tired and too kind and too afraid of the fight to measure the truth and write it down. So here's what I'll leave you with, from a 66-year-old widow on a porch in Belmont, North Carolina, who learned this the hard and the late way. Nobody is too small to be lied to, and nobody is too old to keep a notebook. If you've ever sat at a table and smiled at someone while a part of you knew that something wasn't right, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments what you did, or what you wish you'd done. I read them. I'm an old woman with time and a porch and a green spiral notebook, and there's plenty of room in it yet for everybody else's truth. And if this story sat with you, do an old nurse a kindness and subscribe so the next one finds you. I've got more of them. Stories about mothers and the people who underestimated them, and the quiet ways the truth comes home in the end. It always comes home. You just have to be patient enough to measure it. I'll see you next Sunday, from Belmont.